No, I choose people who don't want to be written about, on the
Right.
whole, whose lives are shrouded in mystery and they want to hide their secrets. And I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to know. I wrote 4 years ago a book about Prince Charles, and it was a story about how he had rehabilitated himself after Diana's death and how Camilla also had to be rehabilitated. And it was a number one. It was a fascinating story. So when Meghan came along into the scene, I just thought, this is fascinating. How is this going to play out? To tell the truth, I spoke to very few friends of Meghan because she put a fatwa on anyone talking to me who she could. So I sent off dozens and dozens of emails to her friends, and most of them didn't even reply. And obviously I spoke to her father, who loves her still very much, and said, in the end, whatever she is, she's still my daughter. You can't beat the real story. I mean, that's the excitement of writing these sort of books, that in the end, nothing beats the truth.
Okay, so buckle up because this one is a wild ride. We're diving into some seriously murky waters involving Meghan Markle, Prince Andrew, and a whole lot of coincidences that are making people raise some serious eyebrows. You know how sometimes you hear a rumor and you're like, nah, no way. But then you hear it again and again, and suddenly you're thinking, wait a minute, that's kind of where we're at with this story. It all comes down to this guy, Tom Bower. He's basically the royal family's worst nightmare. He writes these tell-all books, and he doesn't hold back. And his latest claims are connecting Meghan and Andrew in ways that are, let's just say, less than flattering. Now, before everyone screams conspiracy theory, let's be clear, Bower isn't saying Meghan and Andrew were like besties or anything. What he's suggesting is that their paths might have crossed way earlier than we thought, and in some pretty shady circles. And he's got what he calls receipts, which are basically a bunch of coincidences and connections that when you put them all together, paint a pretty interesting picture. The big question is, did Meghan know about Prince Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein before she married Harry? And if so, did she hide it? And was she linked to that crowd even before Harry came into the picture? Let's rewind to Meghan's colleges. Apparently, back when she was supposedly hitting the books at Northwestern, there are whispers that she was actually jet-setting around the Mediterranean with some seriously wealthy people. Now, there are no official records of these trips, but according to Bower, there's enough chatter and resurfaced social media stuff to make you wonder. We're talking about disappearing for weeks at a time, then coming back with stories that didn't quite add up. One source even said that Meghan was known as a hardcore, yacht-partying person ready for anything. Obviously, that's just one person's account, but it's enough to make you go, And this is where it gets interesting. Some online sleuths have pointed to names like Yuan Ray, a London socialite and investment banker who was apparently connected to Prince Andrew's associates before the Epstein scandal blew up. Again, Bower doesn't directly accuse Meghan of anything, but he highlights these coincidental patterns of proximity. It's like ambitious Hollywood hopeful meets the European elite. Think about it. Meghan is in these old sorority photos looking all innocent and preppy. But then, according to this one former peer, she'd vanish for periods of time, then come back with these crazy stories. Maybe it was just a wild summer, but the timing puts her in the same luxury playgrounds that Andrew's friends frequent. And it doesn't stop there. After college, Meghan's story is all about study abroad programs in Spain and Argentina. But according to some entertainment columnists and travel blogs, those early 2000s were a nonstop party tour. Madrid, Ibiza, Thailand, Monte Carlo. Sounds less like classrooms and more like VIP, invitation-only summers, right? Friends are supposedly recalling these lavish villa parties and friends of friends who were strangely well-connected for an actress trying to get her big break. Bower calls this period the ghost years. Gaps in the timeline where Meghan would pop up, then disappear again. No photos with royalty or scandal, but some tabloids have pointed out that some of the same billionaires later linked to Andrew were hosting events during those exact months. So, is this just a coincidence, or is it selective memory? Bower leaves that up to us to decide, but the fact remains these connections are out there, and they're not going away. Then you've got this whole thing about Meghan supposedly hunting for a man in England starting around 2013. The story is she wanted wealth and fame, and that she specifically targeted Harry. Now, that's a pretty harsh accusation, right? But it's out there. From 2014 to 2016, she was reportedly hanging out at Soho House locations from Toronto to Istanbul with fashion people and film product. There's this one event in Istanbul hosted by Ron Burkle, a billionaire who invested in Soho House and who's also been linked to Prince Andrew. Photos from that night show Meghan with Eddie Redham and other British elites, but no one's saying she was hanging out with anyone scandalous. Still, those photos disappeared from the internet right after her engagement to Harry was announced. Bauer points out that a lot of Meghan's key relationships, her stylists, her PR teams, even mutual friends with Harry, can be traced back to this Soho House network. Some people see it as ambition and smart networking. Others see it as calculated image building behind closed doors. And those parties, as glamorous as they looked, were full of conversations, introductions, and alliances that would change Meghan's life forever. Okay, so flash forward to 2017. Way before the royal wedding craziness, Meghan goes to a wedding in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Sounds like a fun getaway, right? Well, apparently this trip raised some eyebrows that on paper, she was there as Harry's plus one, celebrating one of his buddies. But then the tabloids started digging, and they found out that Meghan's travel plans were kind of sus. Harry supposedly flew commercial with his friend like a normal person. But Meghan, sources were saying she rolled up on a private jet. And get this, it was supposedly connected to Ron Burkle, the same Soho House guy linked to Prince Andrew. And the guest list for that wedding, it was a wild mix of Meghan's Hollywood crew and Andrew's extended fam. Sarah Ferguson was there, Princess Eugenie too. And allegedly, Andrew himself was kicking around nearby. Now here's the thing. Even though there were tons of photos from this wedding floating around, there's not a single one of Meghan and Andrew together. Some people online are calling it a strategic absence, like they were intentionally avoiding being seen together. And remember Oprah's interview. Fergie claimed she'd never met Meghan before Harry. But according to some timelines, their circles had definitely overlapped before that. So, was Jamaica just a coincidence? Or was it the moment when these two royal storylines quietly collided? If those blurred photos and missing shots were just accidents, they were timed perfectly. Fast forward again to when Meghan and Harry announced their engagement. The media coverage does a complete 180, like someone flipped a switch. According to some analysts and royal biographers, certain stories, especially the ones hinting at Meghan's pre-royal connections, started disappearing from the internet. Section 19. Blog posts vanished, image credits changed, and interviews that were once easy to find suddenly led to dead links. Some journalists were privately saying that media management teams were working overtime to clean up her image. Basically, they were trying to make her look like a squeaky clean newcomer, untouched by any royal drama. And let's be real, the palace probably wanted to avoid any comparisons between Meghan and Prince Andrew, especially with all the heat he was already getting. It was safer to pretend she was a blank slate. But some people started noticing these changes and compiling before and after examples showing how the tone and wording of articles subtly shifted after 2017. IKT wasn't illegal, just careful editing of perception. Some saw it as smart PR, others saw it as a cover-up. And when Bauer started hinting that his upcoming book had the receipts, some outlets refused to even print it. Royal watchers knew this was going to be a mess. When Bauer finally dropped his book, the palace was probably sweating. He basically said his research was a bunch of open secrets and overlapping connections that he pieced together from insiders. He never said Meghan did anything wrong, but he pointed out all these coincidences connecting her early travels to people linked to Prince Andrew. We're talking about overlapping guest lists, the same charity events, names that kept popping up at international gatherings from the early 2000s to 2015. He called it circumstantial alignment, and the internet went wild trying to recreate the timelines using flight data, red carpet photos, and old news articles. Critics accused him of just stirring the pot without any real proof, but supporters praised him for calling out what the mainstream media was ignoring. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about asking questions about royal transparency. Bauer wasn't exposing. He was connecting dots that other people pretended not to see. And when those dots started forming patterns, the palace went silent. Once Bauer's findings started making the rounds, royal reporters noticed something weird, a sudden wave of restraint. Some UK outlets were supposedly told to avoid linking Meghan's timeline to anyone connected to Prince Andrew. They called it editorial discretion. But for royal watchers, the timing was telling. The palace's strategy seemed clear: damage control. But in the age of social media, secrets don't stay buried for long. The more they tried to suppress the narrative, the more people dug in. And that's when the real question started. Was Meghan just an ambitious actress who got lucky? Or was she part of a bigger game? The Epstein scandal had already shaken the royals. Now, with Bauer's book, it was like the walls were closing in. People were asking, what did the palace know? And when did they know it? The silence was deafening. No one from the royal family addressed the allegations directly. No one needed to. The narrative was already out there, and it was gaining momentum. As the controversy swirled, Meghan and Harry's public appearances became fewer and farther between. When they did show up, the